This is The Camp with Zach Heilprin and the Athletics' Jesse Temple.
Yes, welcome in. Wisconsin still in the midst of spring practice. There are 7 practices through, got 8 more to go. We'll be on the field Tuesday morning. We saw them practice on Saturday. It was a lot of 11 on 11. It was the longest practice of spring so far. A lot of even some move the ball periods. But, Jesse, before we get to that, we have to start with the news that came out after practice on Saturday, and that is that Nick Evers is back in the transfer portal. He obviously was he was the first guy that came in for Luke Fickell and company back in December of 2022. Felt like he was kind of the guy that started everything off. Never truly got his opportunities. And, you know, when we have talked about potential for guys entering the transfer portal and freeing up scholarships, and we don't like to speculate. It's not fair to players. It's not fair to the guys to do that. But behind the scenes a little bit, we have talked about it. And when we were talking about it up on Thursday, and it really felt like it was just a matter of time for Nick Evers to try and go find somewhere else to play football.
This was not a surprising development in the least. Obviously, the transfer portal window officially opens on Tuesday, and it runs from April 16th to the 30th. So you're getting a little bit ahead of the curve by making your plans known at this point. But I feel like the writing has been on the wall, and I know that there may be some who say, well, he just got here. He was here for 1 year. Why don't you stick it out? And look, you and I have had a chance to watch a lot of practices where Nick has been involved. And I wrote about this earlier today as part of a story about Evers moving on. But I counted all the practices that we had a chance to see in the Luke Fickell era. All 15 last spring, 8 during preseason practice in August, and 7 this spring. That's 30 practices that were open to the media. And I think you had pointed this out earlier in the week. We didn't see a single rep where Nick took a first-team offensive snap. Now, obviously, last year it was a different situation. Tanner Mordecai came in, was the immediate starter, but Braden Locke emerged as the clear-cut backup. And this year, when you go and get a Tyler Van Dyke from the portal and Locke is still there, that's who they went with as their top 2 quarterbacks. And Nick is in the same class as Locke. Locke is obviously ahead of Evers in the pecking order. Nick was just getting third-team reps. And not only that, but it was at the point this spring where he was basically splitting snaps with freshman early enrollee Mabry Matire. And it's tough to get into a rhythm. It's tough to show what you can do when there are 4 of your 5 offensive linemen are walk-ons. And obviously, he set himself back last year because he didn't have the knowledge of the offense in the way that he should have, which he acknowledged when he talked to us last year. But even though we heard everything about the strides that he had made, I just didn't see a clear path forward for him, to be honest, unless every other quarterback got hurt. And when you've got a player empowerment era and you can transfer multiple times, it just was not a surprise that this is what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, though, it is disappointing, I think, for fans, though, because
absolutely
there was about a 10-day or 12-day period there where it looked like he was the future of Wisconsin. And then they got Tanner Mordecai, and then they got Braden Locke, and then we saw spring, maybe Nick Evers is going to be the number 2, right? And it just never even came close. He just never came close to getting on the field, even when Tanner Mordecai went down last fall, and it was Braden Locke the starter. The backup was Miles Burkett, at least listed as, and I know that Luke Fickell said there would be a competition between him and Nick Evers, but I don't think that was ever going to be the case. It was probably going to be Miles that went in the game. So it just felt like he was never even close to getting on the field. I certainly hope he finds a place that is going to suit him, but, third team in 3 years now for him.
Yeah, and that's the other component to this as well, is we're not talking about a quarterback or a player where you watched them and you saw their first throw and thought, that guy can't play quarterback here. He had such a unique skill set, especially for a Wisconsin quarterback. And that's why you and I both probably got more questions about Nick than we did any other quarterback, in part because no one really had a chance to see him and his reps were limited in practice. He got the best athleticism in the group, obviously. Tyler Van Dyke praised the way he can make what he calls off-platform throws. So if a play breaks down and he's on the run, he can still deliver with accuracy. His arm strength is there. A lot of it, obviously, initially had to do with what Phil Longo called knowledge equals reps last year. I don't know where things stood this year. That's the other part of this that's a challenge is Longo praised Nick when we had a chance to talk to him and the top two quarterbacks, which, by the way, they did not make Nick available on quarterback day a week and a half ago. But he also said that they wanted to get him where he needed to be. So I don't know, like, time will tell to me whether Nick deserved a better opportunity. Selfishly, I would have liked to see what it looked like with a first team offense, but you also have to earn those reps with whatever it is you're doing behind the scenes and also on the practice field. But yeah, I think that's part of the disappointment here is the skill set was so special on the surface. He's a top 10 quarterback in the 2022 recruiting class. And I referenced in my story that scene from The Office. Michael Scott opens his door and he yells, "Oh my God, okay, it's happening." That's honestly what I felt. And I felt like the fan base experienced when he initially committed back in December of 2022 to signify this is what the Luke Fickell, Phil Longo era is going to look like. They're raising what's possible at all these positions. And obviously it just never came to fruition.
Yeah, that that feels all too familiar, though, especially at quarterback, especially for Wisconsin. Does it not? I mean, like it feels like
yes,
you put such huge expectations on guys that have never done it. And for the most part, they end up not doing it, whether that's Graham Mertz or Nick Evers or go all the way back to whoever 4-star quarterback that they brought in. You mentioned when seeing him throw the ball, clearly he's a quarterback. He's got the arm ability. He's got the athletic ability. He's got all those abilities. The putting everything together and putting it on the field and putting that whole package together and making it happen on the field, that's still something that he's striving for. But this was not a situation where the first pass you saw from Austin Confessus, you knew he was not a quarterback.
Yeah, that's what I was referencing.
Right. So like that, well, I'll bring it out because I can still remember it. You know, it was just a pop fly. Like he's in Utah, amazing. Not so great. Not Utah. Where was he from? He's from Utah. Yeah,
I think so.
Utah. Yeah. Spring practice at Wisconsin, not so great. So, but right. Yeah, then you felt like he had the ability to do it, just couldn't put everything together. And I think I made this point. I might have made it. I can't remember where I was talking about it, but yesterday, for the first 6 practices, Mabry Matire was running essentially the scout team against the first team defense when they broke up into their periods where a little bit was teaching periods, right? And so it was like some full live stuff and then some on cards. And Mabry was running that for the first 6 practices. And then yesterday, Mabry was back down with the other quarterbacks and it was Nick running it. And I don't know if that was the last straw. I'm guessing it wasn't, but it kind of indicated where he was at. You know what I mean? He was not even running his own offense, and he ran the entire thing. Unfortunately for me, almost the entire last minute of the 2-minute video is just him throwing, which obviously means absolutely nothing now. But it was at least got to see him throw the ball a little bit.
Well, that's the other thing too in this is, and this is speculation, but go back to this process for Nick. I mean, when he first really started to consider Wisconsin was in November of 2022, before Luke Fickell had even been hired, and Phil Longo wasn't even in the picture. Was friends with Avion Jones, who was then a defensive back for the Badgers. Both went to high school in Texas, and I think he would have played for Jim Leonhard, very interested in Wisconsin at that time, and whatever it would have looked like. And then the math changed when Longo got on board. Now, obviously, at the time, Nick said all the right things. Longo had a history of developing quarterbacks, but they went and got 2 other quarterbacks that felt like they fit more the mold of what Longo was looking for. And it never really happened for him. But Mabry Matire, why I bring that up, Mabry Matire, another guy, Longo's guy, obviously the first guy committed in the 2024 recruiting class under this new staff. And he was earning more snaps. If you just really studied the 3 reps by the end, if it wasn't more snaps, it was certainly more passing opportunities. Most of the time Nick was in, he was just handing the ball off. And I think of what one of his last throws was, just as that last glimpse of what the potential could be. And again, this is with the threes, so you're also going against threes, but he pulled out his right, he kept the play alive, and he fired a strike to walk on receiver Alex Mueller for a first down. And I think he ran one more play, and 4 hours later, he publicly announced his decision to enter the transfer portal. So you just never got to see enough of it from Nick. And remember the very first spring practice last year, the play of the day, and this should say something about what practices are like sometimes, especially the early ones. It was in skeleton drills, but it was Evers throwing a dart 40 yards down the left sideline to Chris Brooks Jr. for like a 40-yard reception. And I just remember thinking, wow, so that's why they got him, and he's going to have a shot. And obviously, there were other reasons why. It was not physical talent in my mind, obviously, and it just never happened for him. But certainly, you hope for his sake that he finds that can utilize his skill set. And I'd like to see what it looks like. And I suppose the next topic for us is spinning this forward about what does this look like? What does this mean for the quarterback room moving forward?
That was where I was going to go next because they have 4 scholarship quarterbacks in the room now, right? It's Tyler Van Dyke, who's got 1 year left. It's got Braden Locke, who, if he doesn't win the starting job now, you would think he's the starter, at least in the conversation next year. And then it's Mabry, and then it's Cole LaCrew. And Cole LaCrew it feels like he's sat out more than he's practiced because of injuries. Last year it was the shoulder, and this year it was a leg, right? Like, wasn't either way. He's not practicing, not taking part at all. I feel like if you're Wisconsin, you're kind of looking at the transfer portal here in the spring and thinking of maybe adding another body there.
Yep, I think you're kicking the tires there as well. LaCruz had, and he tweeted about this, his second surgery in as many years. Mabry obviously is coming straight out of high school. And you're walking a fine line there if you're going in there with 2 quarterbacks who really you feel comfortable with if you had to throw them into a game. But if you do kick the tires, it's a situation, at least in my mind, where you likely pursue a younger quarterback who is willing to spend a little bit of time learning if they think they'll have a shot down the road. And every year is going to be different. But if we spin this thing forward, so we know Van Dyke has 1 year of eligibility left, and we know that Braden's younger brother Landon is committed in the 2025 class. But I don't know if you would feel comfortable with just that as your room moving forward. So I agree. Certainly you owe it to yourself as a staff and as a program to explore, but this is always a challenge. We talk about it both in basketball and in football. You've got to find the right kind of guy. If they're in the portal, they're there because they weren't happy with their situation before and probably weren't playing. So are you willing to come to another place where it's likely, at least right off the bat, you're not going to play?
Yeah, it's interesting because a number of guys that Wisconsin got in the portal this year, a number of them are going to obviously produce and be used quite a bit. But then there's other guys like a Tyrell Henry, a wide receiver that Wisconsin has that he's not among the top 5 or 6 at this point. And he came here from Michigan State, and I know that they obviously had a coaching change there, but there are those type of guys that are going to be a little bit further down the depth chart, that there are more people in the portal than there are spots available for them. And so maybe it gets down to it and they find somebody that is willing to do that. I think they probably have to act, because I don't think they're going to take another quarterback in 2025. And especially, this is also, there's a lot of moving pieces here, Jesse, because if you take another guy and, Braden Locke looks at it, or even if they take another guy next year and Braden's just like, what's going on here? Am I ever going to get my shot to be the guy? And then you maybe upset him, and then you perhaps upset the Locke family. It's just, there's a lot of moving pieces here that you have to play with. But at the end of the day, you have to do what's best for Wisconsin, and what's best for Wisconsin is to add another body, you would think, to that room.
Yeah, we know.
Like it's there's a lot of relationship here. Is what I'm saying, and because of what kids are able to do right now, move around as much as they want. Like, if this was 5 years ago, Braden Locke ain't going anywhere because he already made his one transfer. He'd have to sit out going, not even 5 years, but like 3 years ago. He'd have to sit out if he went somewhere else. He doesn't have to do that. That's why the same thing with Nick. Doesn't have to sit out. He can go and play somewhere right away. There's
Right.
the kids, and I'm not saying this, I'm not talking about Braden in general. I'm just talking about kids in general, that if it's not there for them or they don't see a path to it, then you're going to find somewhere else that you can maybe have a shot.
Yeah, I agree. Again, if you are any program worth their salt, you're going to explore every position to figure out what doesn't make sense to pursue, but you're also threatening to upset the apple cart, if you will, by consistently bringing in guys. I know Luke Fickell has said he doesn't want to consistently rely on at least 1 year transfer quarterbacks for the program. But still, if it's a guy with 2 or 3 years left, he's going to want to try and compete for the spot of guys who are already here. I think it's a really delicate balance. You want to make your program better, and I think players, at least in part, have to realize that that's part of the process. But at the same time, if they don't like it and can't get over it, they're also fully capable of leaving. So I'm intrigued to see what happens with this portal window. I know Luke did not want to address anything in specifics last week, but we knew then that there were going to be some moves, and we certainly know that Nick's decision to leave will not be the last when this portal window is all said and done on April 30th.
Accurate. That is accurate. All right. Let's move on here a little bit. We can talk about the wide receivers, but I'd rather just before we get to it, we got to talk to the running backs on Friday for the first time, specifically Chez Mellusi for the first time since his ugly, ugly injury at Purdue last September, which obviously ended his season and made it tough for Wisconsin, made it tough for the Badgers at all because Braylon Allen was obviously dinged up quite a bit as well, and were forced to use Jackson Aker and Cade Yakimelli a little bit more than maybe they were expecting to going into the year. And we got to hear from Chez and exactly how everything played out. And it wasn't just a fractured fibula. The ankle had to be reconstructed as well. It was a process, but he also said it was not as bad. Like the injury itself was bad, but maybe not as bad as some of the other things he had to go through, specifically the ACL and how much more difficult that is to come back from than what he is dealing with right now. And he also said that, we weren't expecting to see a ton of him here in the spring. And while it wasn't necessarily his call on its own, he has taken part in a lot more than I think anybody thought he would.
Well, in February, Fickell said that he didn't know if Chez would have any load really in the spring. And it sounded like, okay, they're just going to work him back really slowly. Maybe he'll do some indie, but there's just no way we're going to see him in team periods getting tackled. And on day one, he looked like the Chez of old. And he's still trying to work his way back, obviously. He said his body and his mindset, I think, is about 85% in terms of getting all the way back. But physically, he's been cleared. And you're right. When he learned, this is what he talked about, he was talking to the doctors, when he learned it wasn't something like an ACL and that the recovery was going to be a lot shorter time frame, it allowed him to envision what recovery would look like and give this a go to try and come back and do this for a sixth season. And he also talked about the importance of silver linings. And this is really important because if this injury had happened a week later, he would not be here at Wisconsin. But because it happened in the fourth game of the season, it allowed him to preserve a redshirt year. He never took a redshirt when he was at Clemson in those first 2 years, came right to Wisconsin and started playing. Obviously, the fifth year was the result of him being able to use the extra year of eligibility from COVID in 2020. So he talked about how thankful he was for this opportunity. And I think the thing that stood out most to me from what he was talking about is the knock on him, understandably so, is he just keeps getting injured at Wisconsin. He's had 2 season-ending injuries. The other one broke his arm and missed 4 games. He's missed 17 games over the past 3 seasons. But he said he doesn't consider himself to be injury prone. Yeah, I've had my fair share of injuries, but injury-prone injuries are where someone is injuring the same thing multiple times over and over again. I think at the end of the day, I don't know if I can say this on the show, Zach. He said, I just have shitty luck sometimes. I thought that was a great way to put it, because what could he have possibly done to avoid somebody falling on him and him breaking his leg and shattering his ankle or tearing an ACL against Rutgers. So he's extremely motivated to be healthy. We know what he can do, at least in that 4-game sample size with this offense. He can be extremely dynamic. So if he can stay healthy, he can put together a really special season at running back.
Yeah, I don't know that I've seen the same explosiveness yet that I saw last fall, because he was as healthy as he'd ever been last fall, right? I remember that, what was it, an 80? How long was that run that he had? Was it 89?
89, yeah, 89 yards against Buffalo in the opener.
Like, and I remember talking to him afterwards and asking him, like, is that something that you could have done last year coming off the ACL? And guys are obviously very um, confident in themselves, but just where he was physically last fall, he was in the best place he had been in, because he had the entire offseason after 2022. He was healthy and was able to go through it all, and he hit the ground running. And this offense was obviously just very, very good for his skill set. I don't know that I've seen the exact explosiveness yet, but as he said, he's starting. He didn't even say that he was all the way back to that yet. But I feel like if he can get there, it's going to be very, very good for Wisconsin and good for Chez, because he believes he can play in the league, and I don't think he has any doubt in his mind that he can do that. He just needs to put together a healthy season, and hopefully he's able to do that for his sake. The other running back that we got to talk to, obviously, is the guy that has turned plenty of heads this spring to this point. I think we were doing it we talked about it on Temple and Heilprin. I think we could both say maybe a top 5 most impressive guys that have played that we've seen so far in here in spring. And his name's Tawee Walker, the transfer from Oklahoma, and another very interesting guy. And that went through, it's not easy leaving the place that he left, but he wanted an opportunity, and he may get it here based on some of the stuff we've seen.
I think he's going to end up getting it. I really like what Tawee Walker has been able to show through 7 spring practices. And you're right, when we were discussing our top 5 players who have stood out in some regards, and I said this before, we're looking for people that we don't know much about because they haven't been here or they haven't shown much. So if you see a Will Pauling stand out, you're just kind of used to it. Well, Walker came in, and he's 5'9", 222 pounds, and you think he's just going to be a bowling ball, but there is tremendous burst, and the offensive line deserves some credit here. I know we talked a lot about the potential pitfalls of this offensive line, specifically in regards to depth. There are some situations where he gets a hole, and man, he really gets ahead of steam. It's hard to bring him down. And on top of that, I know you've been impressed with his pass catching ability. That's something that's really important in this offense. I can see Walker and Mellusi being that 1-2 combo. Obviously, Jackson Aker and Cade Yakimelli hope to have a say in that. I don't necessarily know what their roles are going to be. I think Aker can kind of go back to his fullback roots in some capacity, where he can be a lead blocker for one of those other guys, because he has that in him and can be very good there. But I think Walker has really stood out with what he's been able to do through 7 practices, and this is the opportunity that he wanted when he decided to enter the transfer portal from Oklahoma. He just wasn't getting as many touches as he thought he should get, and we'll see what the distribution looks like here. But clearly, it's more than just he's an insurance policy in case Chez gets hurt. No, I think he's going to be a key contributor.
They're not anywhere close to the same player, but their situation kind of reminds me of each other. And that is Isaac Guerendo, a guy who was kind of down the depth chart, never really truly got the opportunity to be the guy at Wisconsin. Fans wanted to see him more. It was kind of the same way at Oklahoma. Like, people really liked Tawee and wanted to see him on the field more and see him get more opportunities, and they just never came for a variety of reasons. Now, obviously, Isaac has turned his into a huge opportunity that he got at Louisville, especially down the stretch. Now he's a guy that's going to get drafted coming up here in less than 2 weeks, or at least that's the projections wise. So they're not anywhere close to the same player. Isaac Guerendo has elite speed, but with what they left to try and go find, I think Tawee may find it here. The other thing to this is there's 8 scholarship running backs, or there will be when the 2 freshmen come in here in the summer. I don't know how exactly you try and work that out, but that's a job that Devon Spalding's going to have to deal with. And he's not going to be upset about not having enough, bodies in the room, but it is different than anything that he's dealt with before.
Yeah, it's a good problem to have because if you've got talent, you would like to think, presumably, that cream rises.
It's the
But
opposite of last year, right?
yes, but you've got to figure out how to get these guys carries, and specifically the two freshmen who are going to be coming in, Darian and they're four-star running back for a reason. And Spalding's clearly very excited about the potential that both those guys have. Dupree is extremely versatile, can do a lot of different things. And maybe they can help right away. It seems like they've got that type of talent. But in order to do that, some other guys might have to take a back seat. So there's a lot to figure out. I still think Chez and Walker will probably be the top two, but if there's a third who works his way in and it's one of those two true freshmen, I wouldn't be surprised.
I think it's intriguing. It's definitely intriguing. All right, let's get to practice on Saturday. As I mentioned at the beginning of the show, a lot of 11 on 11, a lot of move the ball periods, which obviously gives opportunities for the wide receivers to make some plays. And guess what? They did. And guess what? It was Trech Kekahuna leading the way again for Wisconsin. I continue to just be impressed more and more. I know we kind of mentioned this on Temple and Heilprin on Thursday, but the move that he put on a couple of DBs during a practice on Thursday, just insane and drew the, oohs and ahs from all over the place. Like when you see a big hit or you see an amazing catch, that's what the entire thing sounded like when he made those moves. And he picked up exactly where he left off on with Saturday too. A couple of really good plays. At the one on the sideline where he was able to hold on to this pass that Tyler Van Dyke was rolling to his left and was able to still dot it right on the sideline, and he held on, and the ref was right on top of it and held on. It's just he's going to be a playmaker for them. I don't want to sit here and say I have to preface this every time I talk about him as a playmaker. He has to do it on Saturdays in the fall, but it feels very likely that he will.
That's my sense too. It's his ability to get open. And it's also, I feel like if you just throw the ball in his general direction, he's going to come down with it, which is pretty impressive considering he's not a big dude.
Yeah, by far my biggest surprise of Saturday was a ball on the sideline where he went up and jumped for it and
didn't get it.
And I was like,
I know.
Holy what? It would have been a great catch, but that was like the first ball I've seen him drop all spring.
There are some times when I see him on the field in practice and I'm watching these sets and I'm thinking like, just throw the ball to Trech and see what he can do. And sometimes I feel like they read my mind because for as good as he was Thursday with a couple of really good moves, he also had a nice catch where he went to his knees on a throw from Van Dyke and made another diving catch from Locke with a DB on him. He was even more involved in the offense on Saturday. And it's a mixture of ones and twos. Obviously, Will Pauling is still going to get his number. I'm really intrigued to see what it could look like if both of those guys are on the field together, because I just think that creates so many challenges for a defense. You can't just bracket one guy if you've got players like that capable of being playmakers. But it's not just the speed. It's obviously the suddenness and the change of direction, the way he can plant his foot in the ground. I just feel like we haven't seen that a ton at Wisconsin. There have been all sorts of shapes and sizes of wide receivers, but it's at least intriguing that he's clearly building on what he did in the bowl game, and he's healthy. That was a big part of what prevented him from having a bigger role last year, is he didn't even really have a chance to participate until halfway through the season and didn't play any snaps on offense until the bowl game. So he and Pauling, to me, are be a problem for defenses, but we'll see whether the quarterback can get it there, whether the line can protect, and everything else that goes into it. Because again, I'm making zero bold proclamations about what it means for this offense in terms of overall success over the course of a 12-game regular season.
This is obviously so unfair to do to him, but I'm going to do it anyways. He kind of when I'm thinking back of Wisconsin wide receivers, when you just said that, like different guys with different features and all that stuff, kind of reminds me of Brandon Williams. Who's the third all-time leading receiver at Wisconsin. So again, not doing him any favors here, but a little bit of a smaller guy, but quick as hell. May not be like top, like he's fast. Don't get me wrong. He's very fast. But he just, that shiftiness to get in and out of moves and get in and out of routes and get in and out of trouble with that, just because of his quickness and his short area quickness. He kind of reminds me that when he gets the ball in his hands. And B. Will was a guy that also returned punts, and I think that's something that Trech may get an opportunity to do as well, along with Vinny Anthony. Get the ball in his hands in many different ways as you can. And Will Pauling, I know we're talking about Trech, but Will Pauling was very good on Saturday too. And you could say the same thing about Quincy Burrows and a number of other wide receivers. The other guy that stood out on Saturday, at least offensively for me, was Jackson McGowan, the tight end transfer from LSU. I hadn't seen him do much in the first 6 practices, but he was more involved, especially in the passing game, obviously, on Saturday.
Yeah, he earned extensive work with the second team offense. He caught a touchdown pass from Van Dyke on a rollout. He caught a pass over the middle for a first down from Locke. And Tucker Ashcraft has been sidelined this spring while recovering from an injury, so that has certainly impacted the depth. But I think they desperately need this at that position. We've said it before, Hayden Rucci was the team's leading receiver last year at that position with 11 catches. And everybody else at that position has a combined 16 catches for 146 yards and 2 touchdowns. And so he's got the talent. He was a top 25 tight end in the country coming out of high school. And if they can just get something, I think it would be really good for them. Because right now, it's basically been Riley Nowakowski's gotten 1 reps, JT Seagraves has gotten 1s and 2s, and now McGowan. So we'll see whether he can continue to take advantage of this.
What did we think about the quarterbacks?
Yeah. Good question. Should always be the leading topic.
Well, I mean, I was going to say, we've talked so much about it. I don't know that a lot of thoughts have changed since we talked about it on Thursday, and certainly, last Tuesday when we did the last time we did an episode of the camp. But actually, that was Wednesday. I don't know that a lot has changed. I still have a lot of questions.
Yeah, I do too. I think, well, when you're taking as many snaps as these guys are, and it was a 2.5+ hour practice on Saturday, there's going to be more opportunities for good moments. But I do think each guy has had moments, flashes where you see what they could potentially be capable of. I mean, Van Dyke, there are times where he just puts such good ball on guys. He had a throw to Pauling down the right sideline, perfectly placed between a couple of defenders for a long completion, about 25, 30 yards. And there was another one that really stood out to me where he rolled out of the pocket and Austin Brown is coming after him. He feels the pressure and he gets it off and completes it to Pauling again. And another thing that I think Van Dyke can do, which not necessarily in the same way that Tanner Mordecai could, but I think he's got a really good ability to read the RPO action and then take advantage of openings on the field when defenders don't expect him to run. It's not like that's his bread and butter, but he can do it. It's just a matter of putting it all together consistently. I also think in a perfect world, Wisconsin would love one of these guys to just establish himself, be the clear-cut guy, and run away with this. And that's not necessarily happening. But it's Locke again, just like Van Dyke. He's had his moments. I think we probably both agree he's at his best when he can make those shorter intermediate throws. If he really has to get a lot of mustard on it, sometimes it can be challenging. But I don't know. It's kind of like still feels fairly even. Feels like maybe Van Dyke was starting to get more reps with the ones, but they're still splitting it, and certainly on Saturday they did. So I said this before, I don't feel like by the time spring ball is over, you're necessarily going to have an answer. And I don't know what this means for the offense next season at this stage. It's not like both are terrible and they have to pick the lesser of two evils. It's just that I don't think either guy has dominated in a way that you would want your number one quarterback to with a schedule this tough.
Here's the thing. Phil Longo has said the one time in his career has he actually had to make a decision on a quarterback and who the starting quarterback was. Right now, I think he would have to make a decision. I don't think it's not clear at this point, but we're also only 7 practices into spring. There are still 8 practices in spring, the entire summer, and then a healthy portion of fall camp before you truly need to make or truly need somebody to step up. And again, he said we'd be able to tell if we were at practice. So if we're sitting there and thinking about who it is, I couldn't tell you right now who has had a better one. Obviously, I think he would lean to Van Dyke, but there was an amazing throw by Braden Locke in the red zone to Bryson Green, just an absolute dot
Hmm.
of a shot. It's like 20-yard post, a deep post, and just put it right on him. Threw a couple defenders and put it right on him, and it was a hell of a throw. I think that might have been one of his better throws to this point in spring. It was, and he was jacked about it, and the entire offense was jacked about it too. So that was some good stuff. Defensively, anybody stand out to you either Thursday or Saturday? I continue to look at Max Lofi. I mentioned him after practice on Saturday. I just think because of, and the injuries are kind of this role here where you don't have Kamoi Latu, you have Austin Brown, so you're throwing him in at safety and you're allowing Max Lofi to jump in with the first team in the slot. But if they truly felt like that's where Austin Brown's going to be in the fall, or maybe his best spot, why wouldn't they just leave him there and have Braden Moore as the
Hmm.
other safety? I think they're really giving Max Lofi an extra look at that slot spot. A guy, and as we talked about last week, he's a guy that has some experience there. It's just experience from 2022 as opposed to last year.
Right. Yeah, he's certainly earning a legitimate look. And I think it's kind of like what Wisconsin's doing at some other positions like center. Well, why is Joe Huber getting some reps playing center? You want to have more than one guy ready in case there's an injury or something happens. And I think Lofi's held his own. He had an interception on Tuesday. Um, and he does have that experience as well. And Luke Fickell talked about it, that he's going to give us a lot of options, is how he put it. And Fickell's certainly been impressed with Lofi's ability to come in 2022. He's playing, and then he gets hurt. And then by the time he's back, it's a new staff. They don't really know much about him. Fickell hasn't seen him, so he's not with the ones. And he just, as Fickell said, he kept his head down, worked his butt off, and kept his mouth shut and has put himself in a good position. So certainly Lofi getting reps with the ones is notable. The other thing is I keep coming back to the two outside linebackers, Leon Lowry and John Pius. Pius, yes, a lot of it comes with the twos. And so there's a caveat with that. At times comes with the twos. It did on Thursday. He had multiple sacks, but also most of them came against second team offensive tackles. But I think you're seeing in practice why they went and got those two guys, and presumably they will be more impactful off the edge. There was one play on Saturday where Lowry came in off the edge and he basically stopped the play at the mesh point. Like as soon as the running back got the ball, he was there. But this all and Daryl Peterson too also had a really good day, I think. So that's a good sign for the defense. But like we've said, every time this is happening, people listening have the same questions that we do. Well, what does this mean about the offensive line and the offensive tackles? And are they going to be able to hold up against athletic, physical edge rushers? And I suppose it's a little bit to be determined, which is not how you want to feel. I would say this about the offensive line. They better hope there aren't significant injuries among those starters, because there just is not a lot of experience and depth. There's talent there, especially from someone like a Kevin Haywood at left tackle, but the guy was in high school last semester. And really what they've been doing, if they need a sixth, is JP Benchwall comes up. But there's, I think, a lot of questions the offensive line is going to have to answer next season, because that group as a whole just has not been as good as people expect them to be at Wisconsin for quite some time.
Yeah, it is still early. Still early. It's April. No, they're not playing a game for 5 months. They're okay. Not 5 months. For 4 months. They're okay. They're okay. That's what we're being told as well. So we we will get practice on Tuesday, and then we'll be back either later Tuesday or Wednesday to talk a little more spring football. Jesse, thank you very much.
Thanks, Zach.
All right, there he is, Jesse Temple from The Athletic. You've been listening to The Camp.